Welcome back to a very exciting episode of the podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, go ahead and
Did
introduce
I lose
yourself.
you? Okay, yes, the vivacious, vicious Vicki here in action, live from New Jersey.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. How's the weather up there?
It's beautiful. We were threatened with rain and storms, but we managed to get out of it. So
Very cool, very cool. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
yeah. So I am a North Jersey girl by heart. I'm now currently residing in the South Jersey area, which some like to call the Jersey Shore. um, yeah, I'm a huge pro wrestling fanatic, as you all can tell. Um, just trying to make my way into the world of pro wrestling and do my thing. And it's not always easy, to, I don't want to say be an entertainer, but to be in the profession that I'm in. But I loved it since I was a kid, and to be able to give back to people who are like myself, who are fans first and everything. Super big Jersey girl, man. Like, they always say can't take the Jersey out of the girl. Like, you can't. Like, I've lived in other states and I've done other things, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a Jersey girl. I actually lived in Philly. Fun fact, which is very interesting for me. I lived in Philly for about 3 or 4 years, and very interesting. When you're a Jersey girl and you move to Philly, it's like I developed this accent almost. Like, Philly people have this weird twang about themselves, and I kind of had that mixed with Jersey, and it was very awkward. So yeah, that's a fun fact about me. But yeah, man, I'm just a super Italian Jersey chick who's trying to make it in this crazy wrestling business.
Very cool. So growing up, you touched on being a fan. Did you have anybody that you idolized growing up?
Oh yeah. So for me, Lita was my ultimate favorite. When I first started watching wrestling, it was very interesting because it was like 96, 97-ish. And Stone Cold was the first person I ever saw on TV. And it was the beer truck incident. That just goes to show how young I am. And I was like, this is interesting. What is this? I was like 4 or 5, I'm 28 now, so do the math. And I was like, this is really cool. What is this about? What? And then as I started watching, I got more indulged into it, and I dove into it head first. And Lita came out. And I didn't start watching ECW until after. I would figure things out afterwards. But I remember watching ECW, and Lita was with Danny Doring. And a few years later, not even a year or two later, she was with Essa Rios. And I never forget when she came out with him, as a young girl, how I felt, she was really cool looking, and she had this red jumpsuit on, and she was really different. She wasn't blonde. She was just this redhead, cool chick. And I'm like, oh, wow, she's doing a flip. That's cool. And then I followed, just from following wrestling, I followed her journey. And, once she aligned with the Hardys, forget it. Because I remember the Hardys when they're another one that's part of my journey. I remember watching the Hardys, and I'm like, oh, they're really cool. They're young. They're different. And when the three of them collided, I was hooked. Totally invested, totally loved everything they did. I wore the fishnets. I wore the baggy pants. I did everything they did because I was just so in love with them. And I thought they were super cool. And I related to the big thing about them that hooked me into wrestling the most is I related to the art of being yourself. And that's kind of what I try to do today. So I think for me, the Hardys and Lita, Stone Cold is up there because he's the first person I remember seeing. But the Hardys and Lita specifically are like the main reason why I want to do this for
Gotcha,
sure.
definitely. And I've heard that from multiple people that in order to have a successful character, so to speak, you have to have
Hmm.
a piece of yourself in that, or a 100% of
100%.
you in that just turned up to 11.
Yes. Yes. They always say be yourself with the volume turned up quite a
So,
bit.
in your professional career, what matches stand out to you that you enjoyed the most, and do you have any people that you wish you could wrestle, past or present?
Yeah. So I'm talking more recent day. It was quite years ago, but it was more recent era. Like I'm sure, like you've been a fan your whole life. Like it's more like recent wrestling. It was Bailey and Sasha, and it was a takeover match. I think it was the first takeover match, the takeover pay per view, Brooklyn, and man, they laid everything on the line. And I remember I had like my ins and outs with wrestling growing up before I actually like became one. Always wanted to be one my whole life, but I had like a couple things in my life that prevented that from happening. But I remember watching that match and thinking, wow, like it was like an Iron Woman match, and they went to town, man. And growing up, if you remember like that Attitude Era, that's my era. My era is Attitude Era, and seeing the women then. And Lita was cool, man. Like she was cool. She did all these different things. And even Trish came into herself. She's in that bracket. She came into herself as well. But once time went on and years passed and these girls like came into NXT and did their thing, like they really, really like showed up and showed out. And I think Takeover Bailey and Sasha was one of those matches that I was like, man, I can do this. Like, they really showed what it's like to be like one of the guys. And a lot of girls back then, at least, it was very like eye candy kind of thing, and it was very what appealed to the opposite sex. It just is what it is. That's what it was. And I think as wrestling evolved as a whole, and then as women evolved, these girls even today, like they really show up, and that match was one of those matches that I've studied many, many times. Like I can tell you what happened. Like they really, really gave it their all, and it's a sin to kind of see like where some people go and where they end up, given like their abilities and whatnot. But that particular match, I know for me, like I said, like I can say the Stone Cold Beer Truck incident, or Lita when she won the title for the first time versus Stephanie McMahon in 2000 with The Rock as special guest referee. Like, like those are things that like stood out to me. But like to really like think psychologically as a wrestler,
Very
it was
cool.
definitely Sasha
So,
versus Bailey.
in your career, do you have any matches that you've done that kind of stand out to you? Or
Yes. So I had a ladder match with the notorious Mimi, who is now known as Sloane Jacobs in WWE. She was my nemesis. She was my rival. Me and her have wrestled, God, 50 something times, which is a lot on the indies. It's one of those things that was like, we never did it. We weren't prepared. We just kind of went into it because we trusted each other. We knew each other so well. So we just kind of went into it like, hey, we got this. And it was awesome. It's on YouTube. It was awesome. For people who it's their first time having a specialty match, if you want to call it that, and people who know each other so well and they're trusting each other with these high risk things. That was probably one of the coolest things that I did and one of the coolest moments I've had. And it's even cooler now because she signed, and she holds a special place in my heart. And that was something that I can't even explain, like what that felt like in the moment, because again, my idols are Lita and the Hardys, and to have that kind of match and do your best. I even ended it with a twist of fate off the ladder. That was the ending.
very
So it
cool.
was
Yeah,
one of those
I
moments
can
for
see
me
that
for
for sure,
sure.
especially since she's been called up and signed to
Yeah. Yeah.
WWE. So, what promotions have you worked
Yeah.
for, and do you have a promotion that you liked more than others, or?
So I've worked for a plethora of promotions. One of the most recent ones I'm proud of is MCW in Maryland. Um, I was injured for a few months, so I'm like talking with them slowly about getting back in with them. ISPW, owned by Tommy Fierro, is another huge promotion. Tommy's very close to me, and the promotion means everything to me. I did train at Creative Pro, which is Wrestle Pro. So they're another one. And Monster Factory, I have nothing but good things to say about Danny Cage. I didn't even train at Monster Factory. I trained at Creative Pro. And Danny Cage was nothing but welcoming and brought me in really green, and gave me a platform to kind of like stand out on and everything. I have a couple things coming up, like BCW and Warriors and all these different promotions on the East Coast that are super, super awesome and super like, dude, they're so prevalent on the indies. Like a lot of these promotions are IWTV and really trying their best to make a name for themselves. And yeah, so I don't have like this heart place. But I would say right now ISPW
Very
is like
cool.
is
Yeah.
pretty
So,
pretty much
it
number one
sounds
for me.
like you've had a uh, broad horizon of where you've been, what you've done, and within retrospect to that, is there a
Yeah.
place that you'd like to end up, whether it be the big four, or just keep wrestling on the indies, or?
Yeah, so I mean, my goal is to obviously be signed somewhere and hopefully end up in an Impact and Ring of Honor, AEW, WWE, like whatever, whoever will have me. I'm very versatile. I adapt very quickly. I could be a face, I could be a heel, I could be a good guy, bad guy. Um, I pride myself on that for sure. But this was my life growing up, and once I kind of adapted into the business, I kind of realized like this was my calling. And I think that, you know, it's hard to put your eggs in one basket. They always say don't put your eggs in one basket. Like kind of give yourself like an option or a variety. But I'm very open. I just want to be able to know that like I go to work and that's my job. Like my job is what I love. And wrestling's all I've ever loved since I was 4 years old. Since I saw that first beer truck incident. Like that's all I loved was wrestling. And, I think having an open mind to what the business holds is really important because you don't know with this business. It's not something that's guaranteed. It's not something, and to be fair, like I'm very like, hey, if I don't make it, like that's okay. Like I know I have something, I know I bring something 100%. Like I'm very confident in myself. But at the same time, I know there's so many people going for the same spot that I am. And, there's always that little bit more or a little bit less that somebody has. And, I'm very content with at least trying. But I also know that there's so many options. And I feel like whatever would
Yeah,
fall
and
into my
it's
lap
one
to
of those
start, I
things
would
where,
definitely take.
like you said, you,
100%.
you just want to be able to do it for a living, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's a good goal to have for sure, and hopefully it happens soon.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the
Yeah.
in-ring action, and you're very talented when it comes to that. So, something I ask.
Thank you.
That's
I
it.
try.
Yeah.
I try. It's
So
one of those things
something I
that's like,
ask a lot
you
of
try.
wrestlers that I've talked to is, if you had to pick four people to be on Mount Rushmore, whether it be past, present, who would you pick overall?
Oof. Of wrestling overall? That's a very interesting question. I like it. Okay. Stone Cold, Hulk Hogan, mm, this is going to be really shitty, but Trish
And they're all
Stratus
very talented in their own way.
and The Rock. And I love Lita, and I love Lita more than Trish, and I like Trish. But if I'm speaking as a worker's
And it seems like
perspective
everybody across the
and what
board
they
will either
brought,
have,
yeah, that's my
either
answer.
The Undertaker, The Rock, Stone Cold, Kurt Angle, and with the women, Trish Stratus, Lita, China. So it seems to be a general consensus that in the grand scheme of things, the Attitude Era was one of the best times in the business.
Yes, hands down. Hands down. I mean, and it's like, I don't neglect the 80s because it was great and it started what we have today. But the Attitude Era, the storylines, the wrestling, everything was just there, and those people we keep trying to bring back, and you can't. They're old. They can't do it anymore. And it's like, that. Why do you think WWE keeps trying to bring back these performers who are older or can't do it anymore? It's one of those things that's like, it just goes to show what an impact
Yeah,
it had
definitely. And
on wrestling as a whole.
something
It just
that
did.
I asked
It
the
did.
last
Totally
person
did.
I talked to is, back at WrestleMania, out of all the things that stood out to me was when Austin actually wrestled. You could tell he was kind of rusty but he's still in very good shape. What did you think of that match overall?
hmm
Yes.
So I think it was like you're talking about the most recent one, right? Yeah. So I think for what it was great. I think having McMahon thrown in there was great as well, but he wasn't ready for that. And I think that he was at a point where, like, it's not where it used to be, versus the guy versus the boss kind of thing. Did we still pop and did we still love it? 100%. I called it. I remember screaming, like, Stone Cold's going to come out. Stone Cold's going to come out. Like, I remember I knew it. And it was almost like, I told you so kind of moment. I think for what it was supposed to be, it worked because they're older. They're trying to give, and even Stone Cold laughed. I remember seeing him, like, he kicked Vince and he catapulted into the rope. And I remember Stone Cold laughing, like, it was what it was, and it was what it was supposed to be, and it still got that reaction, and that's what matters in wrestling, is the reaction, the pop. Like, what do you remember?
Definitely.
I remember that.
So, what do you have coming up in the next
I think for what it was
few
supposed to
months?
be, it worked out pretty well. So I have BCW on July 30th. I have Project Codename Wrestling in August at some point. Titan Championship Wrestling. I'm trying to think of what else. Warriors. I have quite a few things coming up in the next, like, month or two. Yeah, I post everything on my socials. I'm very like, hey, I have a show. Like, who I'm wrestling, who I'm facing, what's going on, maybe a promo or two. Like, I'm very open about
Very
what's
cool.
going
Well,
on.
I
So yeah,
appreciate you
that's my
taking
next
time out
month.
of your
So
schedule to
we'll
chat
keep
with
it
me.
there.
I know today was kind of a busy day, and I had a lot of fun. Hopefully, we can do it again soon.
Yeah.
I think I'm crazy, it's just on my mind. Wonder what I think about you